Hello, hello, hello. Good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone. So let's give maybe a couple of seconds before people are joining, and then we can start. Okay. Okay. Let's wait. Okay. Welcome. Okay, welcome everyone. I was also checking the chart to be sure that everything is ready to go. So welcome to the third episode of this series of webinars where what we're going to do is that we're going to discuss several topics that could be relevant for subject matter expert or leaders that wants to really start to understand better what are the different options that they have on the table when they are thinking about implementing different types of LLM solution. Particularly the topic of today, it's one highly discussed but very confusing at the moment, which is the difference between open source model and proprietary models. For this session, we have a very special guest, which is Dr. Jessica Chervy. So I would like you to introduce yourself and then we can start.
Yes, thank you, Matilde. Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Jessica Cervi, and I'm here with Matilde today to talk about the differences of open source versus proprietary models. A little bit about myself. I am based in Barcelona, Spain. I moved here about 6 months ago. Before that, I lived in Canada for 10 years, where I did my PhD in applied mathematics. After finishing my education, I have sort of like pivoted into the data science and machine learning, ed tech field, designed and delivered, various courses for different partnering universities on those. And naturally, in the last 2 to 3 years, my focus has been shifted to AI and GenAI, since it's a hot topic for everyone.
Lovely. So thank you very much. So what we've done is that, of course, we have prepared some questions just to guide the conversation, and also because we want to be sure that some important elements are going to be covered. But also, if you do have any questions, please use the chat to, check in to asking any questions. I'm going to check it regularly. So if there is anything popping in there, we're going to be sure to cover it. So I would say let's start with really some, foundational, concept, which is really, when we're talking about large language models, what's actually the difference between open source and proprietary models?
Yeah, and this is not just for LLMs or generative AI, but understanding the difference between open source models and proprietary or commercial models is important in the industry crosswide. So the main difference is that open source models are typically free to access. There is public access to the code and the model weight. Everything about the model or the software is pretty transparent, okay? They are pretty easy to deploy within your own infrastructure, and how the architecture of the model itself is structured and how the training is done is pretty clear to the consumers in open source models. On the other hand, proprietary or commercial models, they're typically managed by bigger third-party companies. Think of ChatGPT, which is managed by OpenAI, etc. Typically, these proprietary models, they come in some sort of like free. They're free, okay, to a certain level for beginners at the beginning. But in order to use these models, typically you would have to pay. They're often only accessible using APIs, and their structure, their architecture, or their training happens is hidden, is closed. We don't really understand how the training happened, okay? This is something that was quite a topic of a discussion when DeepSeek was launched a few months ago
Yeah.
as a direct competitor of GPT-4. GPT-4 is proprietary. We don't really know how the training of the model works, whereas DeepSeek is open source, meaning that the entire algorithm, the entire training process was made available to us if we were interested in how it works. So
Yeah, oh yeah, sorry.
no, sorry. So the main difference here between open source and proprietary is that the open source may be convenient, but they give you less control because we don't really, sorry, they give you more control because they, we do have access to the code and the tuning and the parameters, whereas the proprietary models, they allow you, they're more convenient, okay, but they're harder to tune.
And so you were also mentioning, already started to mention some very famous brands. So what can be some really famous? So you already mentioned among the proprietary solutions, the ChatGPT, so OpenAI
Mm-hmm.
package, it's a proprietary one. What are other famous proprietary models? And also on the other side, on the open source, if you're an organization, what can be options? So we already mentioned DeepSeek, but maybe we can just,
Yeah.
really.
So let's start with some open source ones. I mentioned DeepSeek is pretty famous. LLaMA 3 is also open source. Mistral is also open source. NVIDIA also has a open source LLM model. So we do have to understand that big companies uh, have deployed both open source models and proprietary models. Okay, so it's not that because a model was developed by Meta or by another bigger company that it means that it is proprietary. Okay, the difference is in how the model is presented to us and what we can see about the model. For the proprietary models, the most famous examples are, as I mentioned, GPT-4, Claude is proprietary, Gemini is proprietary, and so on.
Yeah, and if I may add, so to the best of my knowledge, but please, Jessica, correct me if I'm wrong, Hugging Face is actually the biggest platform at the moment in the world when it comes to open source models. So if you go actually on Hugging Face at the moment, there are more than 1.1 million options so that you can really navigate. So the offering, it's extremely varied and very big depending on, your specific need as an organization, really.
Yeah, and I like to refer to Hugging Face as the biggest repository of AI and GenAI models and data sets available. These days, there is an incredible collection of open source models, data sets, applications, and it's something that I really have started using myself, when doing some training on generative AI. I like to explore what new models are out there. One thing that I would like to point out is to be careful. Okay, Hugging Face is public, is open source, so anybody can go and develop a Gen AI model and upload it, which may work okay. But a lot of these models are not maintained as well as
Yeah.
other ones, right? So although it does provide a large collections of model pretty much for anything you want, you also want to be a little bit careful with which one you pick and where it's coming from to make sure that it's not just going to break in 6 months or less.
Yeah, that's actually a very good point. I think also for organization is very important to keep in mind this difference, because when we are talking about open source, what you can do is that, let me put in a simple way, you can take the raw model, like the Llama, which is
Mm-hmm.
Meta, and then you basically are going to implement, you're going to take this raw model and then doing all the implementation, fine-tuning, RAG, personalization internally, or as Jessica, you are mentioning, you can also go on Hugging Phase and you can find already some applications. But yes, I would agree with you that for companies it's very important to be very mindful, because one thing is for individual professionals or for training purposes, that's okay. But when it comes to use within the business environment, then you need to add several level of cautiousness
Of course.
before you decide, yes, to implement this solution within your organization. Yes, I wanted one other question which I wanted to ask, which is always one of the biggest concern is, with large language models, there is always a lot of concern around
Mhm.
data protection, especially for companies that are very sensitive, of course, to protecting their data. Is one option preferred to the other one? So are proprietary more secure than open source or vice versa?
Well, it really depends on your application, right? So, as a rule of thumb, the open source models, because they allow you for full control, sometimes they are considered to be better for more regulated industries. So, like for like finance, healthcare, etc. Uh, the proprietary, on the other hand, the data can go off-site. You don't really have full control of where everything is stored, and depending on the vendor practices, there may be some trade-offs with that. But really, it depends on what your application is. And so I think it's really difficult to establish right now without knowing what is the application, what works best for you. But depending on what the company wants to do and what their goals are, then you can, like pick the Gen AI model that best suits you.
Yeah, and I completely agree. And what we see, for example, is that at the moment, for example, a lot of governmental bodies or strategic sector, like the one that you were mentioning, like the healthcare, or I'm thinking also oil and gas, telecommunication. They are starting also to open up quite a lot as well to open source solution because of what you mentioned. So it's really about, there is a security element that for certain
Yeah.
industry it may be more recommended. um, I will ask you also one of your thought on that, but I think it's a very also important message for organizations. So when you are implementing your own generative AI solution, you also have to keep in mind that not only one model is going to be there, right? So generally what you do is that you have a multitude of models, and then
Mhm.
depending on the process, depending on the use case, then the system may pick up, the right model. So which means that you within your organization, you can also have kind of a portfolio of
Yeah.
different models. So yeah, so I think this is a very important also element. So what do you think about it?
No, I think you're hitting exactly the point. Like the often a model is not gonna do it all, and it's not gonna be good for everything you need. And also, your company is probably gonna have different departments, different sectors that have different levels of require different levels of security and compliance. And so, I think what's best, really, at the end of the day, it's to like adopt an hybrid approach and maybe use like some open source models where you need more control, where maybe the level of security and compliance can vary, and maybe you need some extra work to meet with the specific industry standards. And maybe for other departments, you can choose to use a proprietary model that can offer some more robust security features and etc.
Yeah, and I think this is also very, very important because I also see that this is a question which is actually from one of the person, which is actually connected to what I wanted to discuss afterwards, and is about cost. The
Mm,
costs which are behind both solution, proprietary solution and open source solution. So you mentioned that open source solution they are free, but there may be some hidden costs, for example, in terms of storage capacity. So what are the different costs that we should take into account?
yes. So as I mentioned, the open source ones, and this is often confused. Like it gets confusing because a lot of people think that just because a model it's open source, it's completely free to use. Well, in reality, there are a lot of hidden costs with it. One of the main things that people tend to forget about is that open source models, in order to be deployed actively and correctly within an organization, they do require the presence of a machine learning or AI team. Okay, that's an expense. Another thing that it's often not considered is the infrastructures. Do you need GPUs? Do you need servers? Do you need storage?
Yeah.
The development time, again, this connects a little bit to the machine learning and AI or IT experts that I was mentioning earlier. But these open source softwares, they are models. They're often, like good for at first, okay, but they come with a hidden set of costs that oftentimes people don't consider. Not to talk about maintenance, deployment, etc., etc. The proprietary ones, there is typically cost up front, okay? So right when you want to use them, you have to sign up for an API. A lot of them, they offer a pay-as-you-go pricing option, sort of like what cloud, like AWS or Microsoft Azure works, something like very similar to that business model. And the cost can be a little bit higher over time to use the model, but also these proprietary models often come with some type of support that cuts the costs of open source models in other departments. You don't need perhaps such a large ML or AI team in-house because the proprietary models often come with support. Perhaps they already have access to GPUs or cloud services to which you can connect, etc. And so, yes, you may pay to, ask questions to your AI models all the time, but you are, in my opinion, removing a lot of other headaches around it.
That's true. And I think one of the elements that I've seen more underestimated it was what you mentioned about the GPU capacity.
Mm.
A lot of organizations they go for open source model. At the beginning of the process, they do underestimate it, that they need GPU capacity. And no, there are big organizations that have already started. No, they already bought GPU capacity, so they do have already an infrastructure which is there for supporting them. But there are a lot of organizations in the market that have not, and so they need to, they need to rely on third parties to kind of renting out GPU
Absolutely.
capacity.
Absolutely.
And that's something that generally, if you have not done this sort of project, the first time that you do it, you don't take this into account when you do the initial budgeting. But very early, you will realize that the GPU capacity is actually a very important
Oh,
cost of these sort of projects.
it's one of the most important things to consider when you want to run these models, right? And I think that, for example, for a start, like it's easier perhaps for startups to think that an open source model might be the best for them because it's free, okay, and maybe because they don't need a lot of GPUs to begin with. But if they scale, then often they quickly realize that they need to switch the entire pipeline because the cost of the GPUs can just skyrocket.
Exactly. And I will connect back to the comment that you were making before, which is about actually the one of the most smart way when you develop your AI strategy is to think about how to mix
Mhm.
proprietary solution and open source. So really, taking into account all this cost that comes from skills, that comes from GPU, and then thinking really about, okay, I don't need to go necessarily 100% open source. I can actually use proprietary solutions for quite a number of applications. So trying to think from the beginning in terms of what use cases can be more suited for proprietary and what use cases can be more suited for open source, it is actually something that can save quite a lot of resources in the process.
Absolutely.
So there is one question in the chat which is a very common concern. So it's not the first time that I hear it. So it's from Alagarsami, which is the main concern when it comes to open source model, if it's then suddenly they start charging.
Mm.
We have seen this before in open source software. And this is a very common, concern. So what are your thoughts about it?
Yeah, I mean, it's very hard to predict, when a model is going to change its politics in that sense. I think that now can be absolutely wrong, and I have no way of predicting this in the future, but I do think that more robust models, for example, LLaMA, that the ones that are developed by like bigger tech giants, for example, I think they are gonna stay open source. They may release a different version. Okay, I'm not saying that Meta is not going to release any type of proprietary model ever, but I do think that the ones that are developed by bigger companies and that are open source right now may have better chances of staying open source instead of like other ones that are developed by smaller companies. But it's definitely a concern, and definitely something that like that's why when deploying an AI system within your organization, you have to have a really clear idea from the beginning of what data you're going to use, what infrastructure you're going to need, what type of personnel you're going to need within your organization to maintain the pipeline. And so this is definitely something that it's a concern that should be considered, and it's good to consider other options because of that.
Yeah, and you've been mentioning several times LLaMA, and I just wanted to add one comment, which is despite what people believe, at the moment, LLaMA is the most successful, large language model when it comes to business adoption. It's not I would put GPT-4 as many will believe, but it's actually LLaMA.
Yeah.
And then it was LLaMA 3, and then it became LLaMA 4. So I think now
Or
LLaMA 4 just recently released. So the last numbers that we got was about LLaMA 3. But LLaMA is a hugely, successful solution into the generative AI environment. There is another question from Arjinder, which is in general, it is more cost effective to deploy any open source software tools, including models in self-managed environment when organizations scale. What do you think about it?
to deploy.
So in general, do you think it is more
Yeah.
effective to deploy any open source tools when organizations scale?
If the organization is self-managed, I think the key point of the question that Arjinder is asking here is that the organization here is self-managed. So yes, if your organization is self-managed and is self-contained, then I do think that there may be a benefit in terms of cost when adopting open source models. But if your company relies on other companies as well for in the supply chain department or in the financial department, etc., that's when I think choosing proprietary models that you can like fine tune and you can adapt better to your needs becomes better. Also these companies probably require a larger amount of like hardware in terms of like CPUs and memory and all that. And so I think that's when the proprietary models are would be better. And it's not just a matter of cost. Okay, so there seems to be a lot of focus on the financials of open source versus proprietary, and it's not just about that, right? There is a lot of other what do you really want your model to do, and what are your needs, and because some models can be customized in a higher capacity than others, right? And so that's when perhaps open source or proprietary models also comes into place.
Lovely. Yes. So I have one more question, and then let's see if there is any more questions from people attending the webinar, and then I think we can wrap up. And it's more like on a personal level. It's a little bit. Let me give a little bit of context behind it. So there has been recently, I think it was Friday or Saturday, I don't remember. There was this article from the Financial Times, which basically said that thanks to DeepSeek, DeepSeek and the Chinese, players, they're really, really heavily changing the large language models market, and they are giving an impressive push to open source. So what this Financial Times article said is that actually the open source model is winning over the proprietary model. Uh, So you, from just your personal perspective, do you have any personal inclination, any personal preferences
I
towards
mean,
one system
I
or the other?
um I mean, I'm in the, like in the education department, we tend to teach both in equal ways, okay? When it comes to myself personally, I tend to use ChatGPT a lot, so I'm not on the open source. I am not on the open source team. I found myself using ChatGPT and doing API calls for my, Python code or this and that, and I'm having quite a bit of fun with it. But again, ChatGPT sometimes goes down, and I do resort to other open source models. So personally, I don't have. I think they're all for basic work. They are very much equivalent. Okay, but when it comes to like specific applications and your own code and making API calls, then of course I do resort to proprietary ones.
I have to say, Jessica, that on that one, I sit on the opposite side. I do.
Oh, really?
Yes. I do. I really, I try to push it. I mean, I try to use as much as possible open source. So, for example, on my personal job, I use a lot DeepSeek. I would say is
Yeah.
my favorite. Is my favorite, tools for personal uses. But I think from a business perspective, what you mentioned, it's very important. It's both solutions, they do come with a number of pros and a number of cons, and then the price, the cost, it's one of the factor
Yeah.
to be taken into account. It cannot be the only driver. It's one of the driver, but GPU availability, use cases, internal skills capacity, or accessibility as well to skills. Because maybe you don't have in-house the right people, but you should be able to access the skilled people to help you with those problems. So this number of factors, they actually have to be taken into account when you make your decision. But I would just say, on a personal level, I'm a big fan of open source, because I feel that the open source are really pushing the research and
Yeah,
development.
I do have to say, I did ask some technical questions to ChatGPT and DeepSeek last week, and I did like DeepSeek explanation better. I thought it was more clear. In that sense, yes.
But yes, I think it was nice. Thank you very much for your time.
Of course.
I hope it was, I mean, for everyone, it was just a nice way to start to get a little bit more clarity in terms of, what you should choose when you're thinking about implementing your generative AI solutions. Of course, if you do have any more questions for us, just let us know. I'm just checking in the chat, but I think we addressed everything. Yes, so I think we're good to go. So thank you very much, everyone, for listening to us. And I wish you a wonderful rest of the day. Just wanted to close with a small note. We're going to maybe send you an email as a follow up, but with Jessica, we are developing a fantastic hands on training on agentic AI. And the purpose of this training is to really, so first of all, think about where really agentic AI can help you within the organization. So, what are the really use cases where an AI agent can be used? And then with Jessica, you're actually going to build an actual agent, and you're going also to
It's
discuss about what to
no
deploy.
code, so everybody can,
Yes.
everybody can do it. It's a non-code course, but yes, it's a really great initiative that Matilda and I are designing, and we're excited to launch it.
Yes, and no code. As you don't need to be expert in coding, you just need to be willing to get your hands dirty, and just try to really build something that is useful, so you can really understand how this agent work at the moment. Lovely. So thank you very much, everyone, and see you next time.
Thank you very much, Matilda. Bye bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.